Aloha, welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers, interviews with people who have special insight into education from preschool all the way through adult education. I'm Jim Shawn, your host. We're streaming every Wednesday, noon on ThinkTech Hawaii, also posted on YouTube and the Hawaii Educational Policy Center. Our guest today is Liam Skilling of the William S. Richardson School of Law at the University of Hawaii. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim.
Tell us first a little bit about your education.
So I'm a graduate of the William S. Richardson School of Law. Actually, let me go back a little bit. My experience in education starts with being a K-12 teacher. So I was a teacher for almost 10 years, teaching elementary, middle school, high school in the public, private, and charter settings. And then after I moved to Hawaii, took this, sometimes I describe as a wrong turn into law school, and am a very proud graduate of the William S. Richardson School of Law. And through, through that educational opportunity, went on to join the faculty there after I graduated, and now teach and administer the, there's an evening part-time program that is specifically for potential law students who are returning, usually people who are second career, working full-time, a lot of people with families, and that program's been open for about 7 years, so I'm the director of the evening part-time program and the director of academic success, which is basically everything that involves student learning for all the students at the law school. So way to support their process through law school, their, the challenges of, legal educational pedagogy and how they're approaching that.
So how many students are at the law school? How big is it?
So our target for the entering class for the full-time is about 90 students each year. Then the evening part-time program, the target is about 24 entering students. Then we have a Master's in Law program, which is for foreign attorneys. So that's a one-year program for people who are coming from around the country. We have an amazing diversity of people from Bhutan and Brazil and all over the world. Then we recently began an advanced JD program, and that is also for foreign trained attorneys, but through the AJD program, they can actually receive their JD to then become licensed to practice law in the United States. And that's a 2-year program for foreign trained attorneys. So it reduces the normal full-time JD is 3 years, and for an AJD, they can complete the program in 2.
So we're looking at 150 or so
No,
students
more
altogether?
More like 300.
300,
Since
wow.
since a JD takes about 3 years.
Oh, okay.
So once those,
Oh, okay, right.
100 plus
300,
enter, and then my evening program students will stay usually about 4 years. So I would actually say probably more like 350 to 370 at any given time would be our target for admissions.
So who goes to law school these days? Aren't there too many lawyers, to get a job as a lawyer?
Well, one, I'm happy to dispel this myth.
Okay.
What we like to say is there aren't too many of the right kind of lawyers.
Okay.
So, and again, this is a common impression that has come after the economic downturn, that legal employment, bottomed out, which to some extent on the mainland may actually have some truth, although even there it's changing. But the difference between Hawaii and the mainland is that we've never had what has traditionally been called big law, so law firms of 1,000 attorneys and these really amazing starting salaries. And I don't mean to burst anyone's bubble about starting salaries in Hawaii, but we're Hawaii, and we've never suggested that people
Yeah.
coming out of law school will immediately, be able to buy 2 Lamborghinis and, a house in Hawaii Kai. So what has been true is that our legal job market has actually held up very well relative to what's been true nationally, because Hawaii does need attorneys. And actually, in a number of ways, we're at the hub of the Asia Pacific region, a place where there's a lot of growth, where there has never been, there have been downturns, but we can provide, legal employment. Basically, the short answer is our legal employment market was affected by mainland forces, but never saw the downturn.
Okay.
In terms of your other question, who goes to law school? That's such an amazingly varied answer. So we are the most diverse law school in America by, the statistics of U.S. News and World Report.
For ethnicity.
For ethnicity and demographics. So that's, I guess we would maybe assume that in Hawaii. And then I think what's even more amazing in terms of diversity, and I see this so much in my evening part-time program students, is that diversity also reaches into educational background, professional background, and, just life experience. So I think there's still a lot of people will come from an undergrad track, graduate in the top of their class from undergrad and think about going to law school. We also have a lot of mid-career professionals who are transitioning, and they're either going to transition from one job to another and actually, join a firm or go to the public defender's office, but also people who think that their background in engineering or pharmacy or accounting combined with a law degree provides this synergy that's so powerful in the job market right now.
To go to your law school, are there areas of sort of specialty that you specialize in, whether it's a subject matter or international or whatever? Talk a little bit about why someone would go to your law school. Yeah.
And so there's no, you don't have a major in law school the way you would in undergrad, but we do have at least 3 certificates, which are areas of specialty, which we're known for nationally and internationally. So, and this actually dovetails well with our overall topic of community outreach, because I think that each of these areas is a place where we do an amazing amount of work at the law school. It is natural that we would have the nation's only Native Hawaiian rights certificate. So the Kuhuliau Center for Excellence in Native Hawaiian Law is a thriving hub of work around issues related to the Native Hawaiian community, which then has resonance in the larger indigenous legal community around the nation. This is a place where they just published the Native Hawaiian Rights Treatise, which was a work, years and years in the making, and is the seminal document on the state of Native Hawaiian rights in the country. And obviously, our namesake, Chief Justice Richardson, was instrumental in some of the jurisprudence that is, where those rights come from. Without delving too deeply into a topic which I will leave to others, this is a time where we are looking at questions of Native Hawaiian sovereignty, formation of a nation, how to do that, whether that's in an international law framework, occupied nation, whether it's federal recognition, all these questions. And, I see so many of my classmates, graduates of Richardson, people involved with Kuhuliau, deeply involved in exploring this issue, having these, delicate, vital, complicated debates about this issue going forward. So I like to think that our school is central to that in terms of community, and has also done a lot of work with Native Hawaiian communities to go out, quiet title, where land may be under dispute and might be at risk of moving out of families that have held parcels for years and years. I remember years ago, some of it was collecting kupuna stories, because the trail of how you can trace back some of the rights, gathering rights, traditional and customary rights, you have to have the original stories to show that this was a traditional and customary right. And if if a generation is not going to be there in the future without collecting those stories, so this goes well beyond a traditional legal realm. Then there's the environmental law program, and this is another place where there's deep connection to community. So we have a nationally recognized environmental law program, always top ranked in the country, and their work, again, involves working on water issues, working in community. I just heard a wonderful presentation last night from Professor Shalonda Baker and her Energy Justice Working Group, which was just doing listening sessions on the North Shore, talking about issues related to the next era merger proposal with HECO, and whether community groups are interested in a big utility approach or a more, small scale, off the grid. So all these questions, and being able to go into communities and talk about these issues and draw out what is legal and what is not legal. And then we also have an Asia Pacific law certificate. And that, as I mentioned, naturally we're at the hub of the Asia and Pacific, and we are super well located to, serve as a bridge. So there's all sorts of things going on at the law school related to, war crimes and genocide center, related to, international mediation center that's being formed at the law school. So, yes, can you tell that I'm passionate about my law school and what we do there?
You need some more coffee or something.
Yeah, sorry.
Right? I'm assuming then that your library is a particularly interesting and rich resource for these areas that anyone might be able to access, or?
Good that you would mention this, because when I was preparing to talk about community outreach, one of the groups that I asked, tell me what you have going on, it certainly is our library. And our library is a resource for the community. There's public access for, the front of the library is available to the public on a regular basis. Certainly people, pro se plaintiffs, people who have their own legal issues are coming in and doing research. They can get support from the library reference staff. There are students who work there as research assistants, and they can provide support. They're also just, our library's amazing. We just had a social justice art show there where we were hanging art from faculty and students and staff. We had poetry. It's such a hub, both for the law school in terms of what's going on there intellectually, but also really trying to provide a bridge to the community. I'm not exactly sure where this is in process, but one of the things, for all the community outreach, I have to say, the judiciary, our Supreme Court, is such a strong partner in looking at how law reaches out into community. I'll talk about this more, I think, in the next segment.
We'll get to that. We're talking with Liam Skilling of the William S. Richardson School of Law, a proud graduate, an enthusiastic member of the faculty.
Certainly.
Right? We'll be back in 1 minute.
Hi, my name's Hillary Weinberg. I'm the host of The Whole Gamut on ThinkTech Hawaii. See us live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. or on our YouTube channel to hear us talk about world affairs from Hawaii and beyond. See you then.
Aloha, this is Reg Baker, and I am the host of Business in Hawaii. We talk about positive stories of businesses in Hawaii, how they have been successful, and how they have overcome some of the obstacles that a lot of us encounter when we try to have a business here. And believe it or not, there are a number of positive stories here, and we want to talk to all of you. So we broadcast live every Thursday at 2 o'clock, and it rebroadcasts again on Olelo Channel 54. So I sure hope to see you next time. Please tune in on Thursdays at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Aloha, welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, Reformers. We're talking with Liam Skilling of the William S. Richardson School of Law, and we're just getting into the proactive outreach and programs that you've been involved with and others at the law school in the community. You're not just sort of in that legal ivory tower. Talk a little bit about sort of the philosophy of connecting with the community that the law school has.
And it's funny, a friend of mine we were just having a conversation this morning where my friend was suggesting, you academics, you have all these advantages, you get to be, you're not real litigators, which is, which in some cases is true. We do have, it is a place where it's important to generate thought for thought's sake. But what attracted me when I was a student and what I observed in the faculty at Richardson was that it was not confined to this intellectual box. What I looked at, which made me enthusiastic about this idea of possibly becoming, part of the faculty there myself eventually, was that it seemed as though each of the faculty members had their academic side, taught their classes, was excellent at that piece, but also used the opportunities provided by being part of the university to do these amazing things. So I think of people such as the late John Van Dyke, who was involved in everything from, bringing suit to bring reparations for the people of the Philippines against the dictator Ferdinand Marcos, to helping to draft, constitutional structures and helping with, developing legal structures for Micronesia, to getting better accommodations for Rusty the orangutan at the Hawaii Zoo. So people like Eric Yamamoto, who was involved in getting, securing, an official acknowledgement of wrongs that were done for Japanese internment victims, and is invariably involved in social justice issues. Mari Matsuda and Chuck Lawrence, who are, so involved in educational issues and working for educational justice, and also issues of, critical race. So, and I feel bad to mention a few because I could rattle off basically everybody on the faculty and talk about the work that they do and how it has community impact. So it just goes into the lifeblood of the law school that it is not enough to, be smart or teach a class, but that what is, what we have as an opportunity, as a community, as a legal community, as Hawaii's only law school, is a commitment and a responsibility to go out and change things on the ground and to make this kind of difference. So there's all sorts of vehicles where it happens. You were asking me ahead of the show to start thinking about this, and one certainly is our clinical programs. So we have a very rich clinical program relative to law schools of our size, and it runs the range from live client, which means you're actually working with someone with a legal concern. That could be an immigrant, that could be an immigration issue in an immigration clinic. It could be a defendant in a criminal case. It could be a prosecution clinic. So all these different places where you interact. Certainly one example that we have now is the Hawaii Innocence Project, where that program is looking at specific instances of wrongful conviction, substantively wrongful conviction, actual innocence, and has worked to secure the release.
So are you talking about, there's a program out there where you place your students, or are you talking about you're actually running the programs?
So there's both, but the clinical programs are run by UH faculty. The first one was the Elder Law, or I believe the first one was the Elder Law
Very well
Clinic.
known, Jim Peach.
Jim Peach, and provide services to people who cannot afford, you know, the elderly in Hawaii and their families, provide services and support, and that's been housed in the law school for years and years and years. One of the newest is the medical legal partnership that Dina Sheck operates out of Kalihi Kokua Valley, and that is looking at how very often when a medical issue presents at the clinic, there may be a legal aspect to it, like what you really need, you know, if there is.
And Kokua Valley is a community health center.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if there is, you know, a child is presenting with asthma, it might be because of mold or other environmental situations in the housing, which may mean that there's a, you know, landlord-tenant issue behind it. Certainly you could have, you know, domestic violence issues present. You know, there might be welfare or benefits issues. It might, you know, there's definitely a strong integration with the Micronesian and Pacific Islander community in that clinic. And her work has been nationally recognized as one of the best clinical models around the country and just has all these amazing things. I will quickly mention a clinic that I teach, which is an interdisciplinary child welfare clinic, which came from Professor Faye Kimura and Jane Dixon and myself and Cliff Tanabe, and was the brainchild of Dean Avi Seufer. And that is where we believe that some complex social issues, specifically the one we look at is children in foster care and at risk of foster care, is so complex and involves so many different professional disciplines that you really need to, you know, the lawyers and the social workers and the teachers and the medical professionals may not work well together. They may even get in each other's way because of their professional lenses. So we teach a class where you bring together students in all those disciplines, work with community partners and say, how do you start to look at these problems, not as something that you just sort of push along or take care of within a bureaucratic system, but how do you get to root causes? How do you solve? How do you address?
So if I were in social work or some other discipline at the UH, I might get credit for taking your course.
We would love you to.
Yeah, yeah.
So typically our classes will try, we try to draw from all of those disciplines and then put the students into heterogeneous groups so that they're learning from each other while we coach them.
Well, everything you're talking about also suggests a multicultural but multilinguistic capability in translating documents and things like that. Have you had to address that challenge? I mean, you're doing international, Native Hawaiian, old documents in Hawaiian language. You know.
So there are certainly, there is need for proficiency in Olelo Hawaii for some of the work that's going on at Kuhulio. Certainly in the child, it comes up. I wouldn't say that that's, you know, central to these. Oh, and of course, in terms of the Asia Pacific law studies, there's a lot of bilingualism, and our Asia Pacific Policy Journal, there's a lot of translation work for the students, and I think that does present an additional challenge in terms of, because I think that's the most cited or second most cited electronic journal. I don't want to misstate, but it is very well respected Asia Pacific legal studies journal academically. And so they're pulling from people all over the world.
So if you're a student coming in, there sounds like there's an expectation that you're not just going to sit there and study for the bar. You're going to be engaged in the community as an expectation. Is that a requirement of students, or is it kind of choice or peer pressure, or how does that work?
There's actually a great history to this. So we do have a clinical requirement. So the clinics I was mentioning, there is a clinical requirement. The American Bar Association just upped their clinical requirement, which means they're sort of now catching up to what we have always had.
Uh-huh.
There's also another element of working with community is there's a requirement for graduation that every law student performs a minimum of 60 hours of pro bono. So that's work with either, nonprofits, but basically with someone that isn't making money on your work, that you're not making money from. That requirement, which is again very high for law schools around the country, didn't come from the faculty, didn't come from the administration. It was generated by the students themselves decades ago, saying this is something that we actually believe should be our requirement for graduation. We want to be giving back to the community. So all the things that I mentioned that I do think suffuse our administration, our history, our faculty, that's what we find in our students. That's what makes it all work, is that by and large, the students who come to us come with a mission to serve community. That can be, more broadly social justice oriented. That could be their, specific community. It can be their family. But it's a pleasure to work with students who, by and large, are not coming with self-interested motives. And it's great to be self-interested. It's great to make a good living as an attorney. That's fine.
Yeah.
But by and large, that's not the driving force of our student body.
And I imagine that all these connections and experiences that you're offering students, that would pay off with connections for employment, whether you're an attorney, want to work as an attorney or not. Is that correct in Hawaii?
Well, why, yes, it does. And I firmly believe that that is not why people are necessarily doing it.
Right.
But of course, and we hear it from legal employers all the time, and of course they want people who are hardworking and smart and get good grades. But they do tend to also look at, are you coaching the soccer team? Are you involved in the beach cleanups? Are you working with youth? Are you giving back? And you find that as an attorney is that you are in demand for those sorts of community involvement opportunities, for those ways to use what you've gotten, that hopefully you have a sense of responsibility around the wonderful education you've gotten, the wonderful skills that you're given by being in law school, and that you can then turn that into something that benefits people beyond yourself. And I think that that does resonate for our students, but I also think that it's something that matters to legal employers to make sure that those are the kinds of people that they're hiring.
And presumably, you're also looking for faculty that have these attitudes, attributes, passions, as well as the students,
And I think that too is a balance. We have a very amazingly talented, academically strong faculty who publish in a wide range of areas. We also have a faculty that I think strongly emphasizes the power of the classroom and that teaching matters. And that's something that I love being part of this faculty, because it is not enough to publish. It's great to publish and to be, to be world renowned in your field, but that it's also important how you interact with students and making yourself accessible. But I do think that we have a culture that values community involvement, and that the faculty will have an impact on community.
Okay, we're talking with Liam Skilling of the William S. Richardson School of Law, and after our break, we're going to talk a little bit about the engagement of the law school in civic education. We'll be back in 1 minute.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on ThinkTech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our archives on YouTube or on ThinkTech Hawaii anytime you like. Why should you do that? Because this is an arts show that I believe is making a difference in lives. We talk with artists of various ilk. We talk with painters and writers, playwrights, novelists, poets, sculptors, dancers, you name it, directors, actors, of course. And we don't only talk about what people do, but we talk about how they do it. And my favorite part of the conversation, we talk about why they do it. And it's really common on this show to hear people say, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And it's very common to hear people afterwards who have seen the show say the same thing. And I hear all the time that people are inspired by the conversations that we have. So why don't you join us and be inspired too? That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. We'll see you center stage.
Welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, Reformers. We're talking with Liam Skelling of the William S. Richardson School of Law. And I wanted to ask about what the School of Law is doing in terms of civic education in the community.
Well, that's a personal passion for me, Jim. So there's actually a whole host of activities that are coming out of the law school, and I'll try to be as systematic as I can. So the law school, so I started to mention before, let me give full credit to the Hawaii State Judiciary. Our current Chief Justice, Chief Justice Rechtenwald is just a huge supporter of activities around civic education. The whole Supreme Court, Sabrina McKenna, who's a graduate of the law school. So I could go on and on, mention all the justices and so many other judges and attorneys who are supportive of this. I'm also the Hawaii State Bar Association, their civic education committee has been deeply involved in these questions and promoting civic education in the schools. So certainly this all comes from a collaborative effort. Mm-hmm. I mentioned my first involvement, I would say, with what would classically be called civic education comes from, I mentioned Professor John Van Dyke, and he was my constitutional law teacher, amazingly brilliant, charming, kind man who never stopped having more and more to give of himself. And he started a project in conjunction with the Hawaii Media Council. And the project is to take information about the First Amendment. So some research 10, 15 years ago showed that students know very little about First Amendment rights.
Which students, like high school? High school?
Well, we actually go all the way down to middle school.
Okay.
But I think the research was specifically on high school students and found that they didn't know what their First Amendment rights were, didn't really understand how, free speech issues worked, what the extents were, and to some extent thought, why do we need these? And so the reason why the Media Council became specifically involved is obviously this is not a good environment for reporters, journalists, if the general public doesn't understand why First Amendment freedoms are important for the press or for normal people. So John Van Dyke developed these lessons. His PowerPoint presentations for con law, anyone who was a Richardson student during the time when he taught knows his PowerPoints, which were interesting and engaging and provocative, and he would run through them and then he would do, give and take with the students and Socratic method and challenge you to support your ideas. So we developed a different version of this that was maybe a little more accessible for high school age students. Mm-hmm. And for the last more than 10 years, I think, we've been taking this out into high schools around Hawaii, so on Oahu, but also on the neighbor islands. Years ago, he sort of passed on the project to me, and we've been operating it since, again, with support from the Hawaii Media Council. And in the time that we've done this, we've gone into hundreds of classrooms, reached thousands of students with these presentations that ask them that certainly instruct them about the First Amendment and the limits, and it's great because we can build in some extra lessons generally about law and how to interpret cases and how the Supreme Court works, but really invites them to think about what free speech means for them. And we've also over time developed it so that it is that much more meaningful to high school students. So it looks at things like, Facebook and student athletes getting suspended because of pictures that were posted on Facebook, or sexting and, new technology issues. So it's very topical for the students. And because we are sending out law students who are a little bit younger, a little bit hipper than we are, Jim.
What are you saying?
And can connect, and can also, in many cases, may look like or may come from the public high schools where they're going in. And they can send this message, whether it's explicit or subliminal, to the students that you can do it too. Whether it's going to college or progressing to another graduate degree or going to law school, this is a path that's open for you because I was able to do it.
So when you're invited into a high school, what are you doing? Is it 42 minutes and, one lesson? Are you there after school? What does that look like?
So there's a lot of different things we do, and we adapt to the classroom. Whatever the teacher needs, we will try to adapt to that. Typically, though, for the First Amendment, there's 2 lessons. One is more broadly the framework of the First Amendment, and one is specific for expression rights in schools and things that will be most relevant to high school kids, whether it's graffiti or music choices. So we try to make it as relevant as we can and bring it to a level that's really meaningful for their lives. There's another program, so there's a wonderful student organization called Students for Public Outreach and Civic Education, which we, a few years ago, chose a more European pronunciation for, so it's called SPOCE.
Of course. Yeah.
Right, because you need a little gusto.
You need a little SPOCE in your life.
Exactly. So SPOCE is involved in a whole bunch of things. One is almost like a corollary to the First Amendment project. So they have street law lessons, and that might mean lessons on landlord-tenant, lessons on, what to do if a police officer stops you on the street, immigration, family law, and they also go out into the schools. Often this is with some of our partner schools. So for instance, Farrington High School has a Law and Justice Academy for their 11th and 12th graders. Waipahu High School recently started a Law and Justice Academy. Roosevelt had one and still has a strong connection with the law school. So specifically with these partner schools, they can almost put in a request for proposal with the SPOCE students and develop, modify, work through lessons on the topics that are most important to them. And again, law students will go into the classroom to teach these lessons and interact with the students. SPOCE also hosts an annual Discover Law conference at the law school where we bring in high school students to the law school, spend a day there, get lessons from law faculty, guest speakers, all of the, so it's a chance. Again, I think one of the side benefits of this is that each of these provides that much more of a pathway in the consciousness of these students about how this might be their future, especially when they come and hang out on campus.
So are you also bringing in college students who are a lot closer to maybe deciding, hey, maybe I want to go to law school?
So we have done, so we were looking at expanding the Discover Law to community college. I think that one of our thoughts, though, in terms of study, especially because some of these, so research has shown that people may already have sort of tracked themselves by the time they're in college, and that if you actually want to change the pipeline, because part of the goal is to find, not only to do civic outreach in terms of that piece, it's also to make sure that the legal profession looks like the people of Hawaii.
Right.
And to see that underrepresented groups cease to be underrepresented groups in the legal profession. So my understanding, the way I've looked at the research, is that you actually have to go very far down the pipeline. So you have to go to high schools, you have to go to middle schools, you have to start setting up that spark probably earlier than undergrad. In undergrad, they'll make their own choices. And we're right across, we're right across campus. They can come down and visit anytime. I think it's even more important to do the specific outreach to the younger students.
So, looking down the road, right, do you see a continued or natural evolution of law schools in general and your law school as the role it plays in the community?
And we are constantly trying to expand these sorts of programs. I have to mention also something that began with the judiciary, but the SPOCHE, the Students for Public Outreach and Civic Education Support, which is the Courts in the Communities project, which is remarkable and something that I believe is unique to Hawaii. Our Hawaii Supreme Court sits in session at public high schools.
Wow.
And hears oral arguments at the schools. So again,
not just
this isn't fake.
Not fake.
This
it's
is real.
The real thing,
and
right?
so they have gone out both on Oahu and on the neighbor islands. This December, I believe, they're going to be up at Waianae High School, hearing oral arguments, and the SPOCHE students and others, the Judiciary History Center, which is a huge partner in all these activities that I've mentioned. So the Judiciary History Center, the Judiciary, they will go into the school ahead of time, prepare the students so that as they are watching the oral arguments and hearing the questions that the justices are asking, often they're questions that they had already thought of ahead of time and said, this is what I want to ask. So they'll be prepped on the cases, they'll know what's going on, and they will be ready to be active, engaged viewers of that.
How much of this is available online or in video or digital form to watch? I mean, that's also part of, sharing horizontally. Is that still a sensitive issue for the courts?
Well, for the courts, that's up to them.
Yes.
Have
they, embraced it?
Honestly, I don't actually know.
Okay.
I believe that the first court in the community was broadcast around the state so that you could get a simulcast at the high schools, but don't quote me on that. I think that happened, and I'm not positive that is a continuing process. Something that we started just last year is the Richardson Law and Justice Summer Institute. It's a little bit of a mouthful. We may work with the branding in the future, but we started a summer law camp, which a lot of people, when I mention this, they're like, who would want a summer law camp? But we actually had very strong interest, and there were 13 students in this inaugural cohort.
High school?
High school.
Yeah.
All the way from freshman to someone who had just graduated and was getting ready to go to college. And they came down to the law school for a week and did a mock trial exercise that ran through the whole week and had classes taught by law faculty. They had lectures from judges, justices, their final mock trial where students who sort of started with varying degrees of connection to what we were offering them at the beginning were all wearing suits and ties and cross-examining witnesses and introducing evidence. And Chief Justice Rechtenwald was there to present the final certificates for the students there on their last day. And we also invited them down for one day downtown where the opportunities included watching a trial in circuit court, visiting the Supreme Court and meeting with the justices there, having lunch at a law firm where the attorneys talked to them about life at a law firm, going to the Capitol and meeting legislators and finally meeting the governor. So
Okay.
it was just a remarkable day.
Well, it sounds like there's even more to talk about with the law school. I assume a lot of this is on your webpage. People can find
You
out
can
more.
find a little video about the Summer Law and Justice Institute
Okay.
on the website.
Well, we've been talking with Liam Skilling, who's enthusiastic and filled with information about the innovative and engaging aspects of our William S. Richardson School of Law. Thank you, Liam, for all this. We'll be back again next week with more education reformers and shakers and innovators and enthusiastic people like Liam. Aloha.